Yo, 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 yo. It's your girl, Lunachick, coming at you on a Monday. Rainy days and Mondays always get me down. I didn't think I'd be here that soon. Usually I skip a day. Mondays are usually my day off. Um, most of my live pop-ups during the week are on Tuesdays, but something came across my desk and I said, "Hold the presses. We need to have a talk." Anyway, as you can see, the title for this video is Aquila and the Abduction of Ganymedes, and how this all came about. This morning I was watching a video by Chuck Swindle, and I linked it in the description box. Um, and I haven't finished the video yet. It's really good. I recommend it. Doesn't mean I endorse everything. I'm finding it interesting, and you might too. But the thing that caught my eye was part of the video in the very beginning, actually. Um, he was discussing Scorpio and Aquila, and referred to Aquila as being located in the constellation of Scorpio, but that's not actually accurate. So it caught my eye. I had to break it down. I went over and made a nice comment on his video correcting that, as is my duty and my responsibility as an astrologer and a Capricorn. Um, I don't, you know, my intention wasn't to point out, "Oh, you're wrong, your information's wrong." I'm not one of those actually people. Um, well, sometimes I am, but not in this case. My objective always is to educate. So, uh, I see a lot of esoteric researchers. They're including the astrology, but I don't, I'm not sure where they're getting the information from necessarily, because somewhere along the line someone got it mixed up because they're not an astrologer. So I thought I'd jump in and share a little bit with the discussion. So, um, like I said, I included his videos in the links in the description, so you might find them interesting. Um, if you follow Cliff High, he talks a lot about the KM, the K Mafia, and so these videos, part one and part two, the KM, the God Eaters, uh, very interesting. And like I said, I'm just part of the way through the first one. And I had to stop and say, hold up, wait a minute. Where did that come from? Aquila is not, Aquila is its own constellation. It's not part of the zodiac, just to make the distinction. Um, the zodiac degrees are based on 12 signs that intersect with the ecliptic, and that would be the path of the sun as it goes across, and also the planets. Um, but the actual constellations, there are, a lot of constellations and stars that are full of very rich mythology. So my response to that point in the video, I'll read it to you, and um, that just to give the basis of the response video that I'm making right now. And I am streaming live. If you are new to my channel, welcome. Please like and subscribe, and I hope you find this to be informative. I am also I also have a Rumble channel, Astrolunachick. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I have a gilded chat. It's located down in the description, a link for the invitation. I have a Substack newsletter. I didn't link that, but if you go to substack.com/astrolunachick, all one word, you'll find me. Um, so you can subscribe for updates, and here on the YouTube channel, you can hit the bell for notifications of when I go live. My regular show is Sundays around the noon o'clock hour Eastern, and then various points during the week when I feel I have something to share. Okay, back to the video by Chuck Swindoll. And now I know the name Chuck Swindoll from like way, way back. I know he's an author. I can't quite place him, but I know that uh, somewhere along the line, my parents, as the evangelical Christians that they were, I'm sure, had a book or two of his on their bookshelf. And it's interesting to see that he's still going and in a direction that I wouldn't have associated him with, but but here we are. Very cool, Chuck. Thank you. I appreciate the information you're putting out. So my comment on the first video is this. I'll read it to you. As an astrologer, I would like to clarify the reference to Scorpio and Aquila at 3 minutes, 3 seconds. Interesting numerology there. Is incorrect, as Aquila is its own separate constellation, not located in Scorpio, but near Aquarius and Capricorn. Although the constellation Scorpio does have an association with the eagle, the constellation of Aquila is separate from Scorpio and lies in the zodiacal degrees of Capricorn and Aquarius from 16 to 26 and 0 to 5 degrees, respectively. So that's 16. The stars, what this means is the stars, the fixed stars in the constellation of Aquila are located at the zodiacal degrees of the astrological signs tropical western. The signs of a Capricorn between 16 and 26 and 0 to 5 degrees of Aquarius. That's where you will find the if you overlay the constellations over the signs of the zodiac, which have precessed, which means they've moved over thousands and thousands of years, called the precession of the equinox. So if you look at those stars, they lie in the zodiacal signs of Capricorn and Aquarius. So if we apply the esoteric meaning of the constellation of Aquila as the eagle, sent by Zeus to seek out the most beautiful boy to act as cupbearer to serve him on Mount Olympus. Aquarius is the water bearer or cupbearer. The eagle who captured Ganymedes, which is Aquarius, which means Ganymedes means the most beautiful boy. We see that from this mythology comes the idea of man-boy love and pederasty, which I think can be defined as y- uh, broadly an the idea of an older man taking on a younger male as a student or um, his protege, but we'll get into that. Um, okay, so that's where we get the idea of that. And now I'm not attesting to the truth and um, accuracy, let's say, of ancient cultures because I haven't studied them, but I have looked, I have done research and I often see it referenced to Plato as having said that the um, talking about filial love and the different types of love referenced, like the love between a man and a woman, um, and the love of a man and a boy as being the love of a man and a boy being like the highest form of love. So it's what we understand or we would associate it with pederasty or the Pediolite. I'm trying to get her. I don't know what I'm going to be flagged for. So you know what I'm talking about, right? We're all hip to the shit right now. You know what I'm saying? So, okay, my comment goes on. The degrees of the zodiac, which in ancient astrology, some of which I'm putting in parentheses, some of which were known as evil, quote, evil degrees. Um, okay, associated with perverse practices, some of those lying in the constellation Aquila, the degrees mentioned above. So, if you research deeply into what the ancients had to say about the certain degrees, which is associated with fixed stars, it's not just any random degree, it was the stars that they were studying and noticing the correlation between these stars in the nativity or the birth chart and certain behaviors and events in individuals' birth charts. So, okay, so I go on. Um, this becomes more interesting when we realize that Pluto is making its return to the US Pluto, moving through the degrees of Aquila. I would also note that the recent solar and lunar eclipses have activated exactly the first degree and the last degrees of Aquila. I will be making a video soon on my channel explaining this in detail, which is what I'm doing right now. And then I just referenced the site constellationofwords.com for anyone interested in mythology, etymology, star lore of the constellations. And that brings me to my video right now. So, what I had noticed a long time, many many moons ago in my study of the constellations and star lore. I found it very fascinating. Uh, the references of what I was just speaking about in looking at the constellation of Aquila. And I'm just gonna pull up the web page that I wanted to reference. And as you could see in the graphic that I have up for this particular video, sorry, I'm going to the constellation Aquila, so I know what I'm talking about and the things that I wanted to reference. Yeah, so I chose the depiction of the constellation of Aquila as it shows the eagle grabbing the boy. Now you see the boy depicted with a bow, and so that makes me think of Cupid. Um, and then on the sides of Aquila, the eagle, we can see Delphinus, sorry, which is the dolphin constellation. Below that, Aquilus, the horse, Serpens, Serpentarius. These are Sagitta is the arrow above. So I guess, this could be, if you didn't know, I could see where it could be confusing, maybe, um, because you might look at Sagitta and think of Sagittarius. Actually, the archer is similar to this depiction, with the bow and the arrow. Um, Below it, Capricornius. Anyway, the eagle is an association of Scorpio, but it's more referencing sort of the phoenix-like quality, the evolution of the lower form of Scorpio, which is the scorpion. And as opposed to the higher form of Scorpio, which is said to be the eagle. But I mean, I get where that could be misinterpreted. There's just one thing I wanted to look up, because on that Antinius. So the boy with the bow and arrow is labeled Antinius, and I know I wanted to point out what the lore. So here's some interesting things about Aquila that we can look at. So basically the mythology is that Zeus sends out the eagle Aquila. Now, Zeus is also known in mythology for turning himself into various birds, which is an interesting theme in and of itself. So, and having turned himself into an eagle, I don't know, we could say, is this Zeus himself turning himself into taking the form of an eagle to go out and search for a cupbearer. So what is the cupbearer? It's basically, this would be his servant, the the one who goes and fetches water. I'm also thinking about it also brings to mind the mythology of, and I'm not going to say that this is significant, I'm just going to mention it because it comes to mind the mythology of Zeus and the raven Corvus. So the constellation of Corvus is located in the zodiacal degrees of Libra. Um, so again, we have the the idea of Zeus sending the raven, sending a bird to go. He sends the raven Corvus with a cup, which is constellation Crater. Crater is the cup, to go and fetch water. Anyway, the raven is lazy and sees a fig tree, and he doesn't want to complete his mission, and he's waiting for the figs to ripen, and gets in trouble because he brings the serpent instead of the cup. Uh, so that's just a side note, but we do see this kind of reoccurring theme in mythology. But in this particular instance, this is Zeus sending the eagle Aquila to go and find him the most beautiful boy to serve him, to be his servant on Mount Olympus. Um, and so the eagle goes and fetches. He finds Ganymedes, and Ganymedes is it means the most beautiful boy. So we often see in mythology birds as the messengers of the gods, but the eagle is like the pinnacle, the king, let's say, and so can be interpreted as the planet Jupiter. Okay, so Zeus is Jupiter. Same thing. Zeus, Apollo, Jupiter, many names for the same king in mythology, but it references the planet. So, what else can we say about Aquila? So, I'll read from Constellation of Words regarding Aquila. The expression eagle eyed describes the eagle who sees all from a distance. Eagles fly higher, so they get a look at the bigger picture. In mythology, the eagle acted as a talent scout for Zeus, instructed to find the most beautiful boy to be cupbearer on Mount Olympus. With his eagle eyes and far-seeing vision that could spot a rabbit 3 miles away, but the up-close vision is very poor. Metaphorically possessing foresight, hence the ability to see the potential. He captured Ganymedes, the most beautiful boy, in his talons. Now, what does that make you think of? Talent scout, right? So Zeus sends out the eagle to scout for the most beautiful boy. Bring me the best. And bring him back to Mount Olympus to serve me, right? So it does then give the stars in this constellation an affinity or a reference for talent scouts, right? Or, yeah, I mean, what else would you call them? Procurers and those who would engage in the, should we say, the merchandising of people for various purposes. So, I think you know what I'm getting at. Anyway, we also have the association with um, those younger serving those in power and being used, let's say, and scouted for their talents. Anyway, so I'm just looking to see what the this website has to say about Antinius. Let's say, where are we? Well, so it talks about the relationship between the Emperor Hadrian and Antinius as being compared to that of Zeus and Ganymedes, which is Aquarius. The emperor, after all, was considered to be a god. So we're talking about the how the ancients viewed their emperors as being God, um, considered to be gods. But I think we would say probably today that these were people who were of a certain bloodline and descendants of those who were considered gods. So Antinius was a former constellation south of Aquila. In modern times, Antinius was variously considered an asterism within Aquila or a separate constellation until they were formalized in 1930 and Antinius was discarded. Okay, so what you see in that beautiful graphic is Antinius is not separate. It was at one time. Now it's all part of the Aquila constellation, which is depicted as the eagle of Zeus abducting Ganymedes. So, what else can we describe? Well, it does go on to talk about, um, let's see. Okay. The origins of this obsolete constellation date back to the year 132 and the Emperor Hadrian. He had this constellation placed in the sky to honor a favorite youth of his court, who, according to myth, sacrificed himself in order to prolong the life of the emperor. So we now get the association of sacrifice, the concept of sacrificing oneself for the emperor or for the gods, right? Okay, sacrificing oneself to Zeus. I mean, is that literal or is that giving one's life up in service of a god? Anyway, okay, to prolong the life of the emperor. You know, the um the eagle is depicted in mythology as picking at the liver. Whose liver? I cannot remember, and I'll have to look it up, but I'm calling to mind part of this a story in mythology where the eagle feeds off the liver. So the liver, hmm, put a bookmark in that. Well, here he is sacrificing himself in order to prolong the life of the emperor. So the emperor being Zeus, being the eagle, feeding off the liver. It just makes me think of that. It's not saying that here. I'm just making a reference. Somewhere in my memory banks came up. Anyway, later astronomers recognized this constellation as the youth Ganymede, the Greek god Zeus, had brought to Olympus by his eagle Aquila in order to serve as cupbearers to the gods. The stars of this constellation have since been given to the constellation of Aquila. So, uh, back to the video, as I was watching it, and obviously the reference to astrology and the constellations caught my attention. Um, and it was very brief. Actually, it's just really making a reference to the constellation of Scorpio and how we have our elections during the season of Scorpio, right? So around November 4th is when we usually have our presidential elections as well as elections for other delegates. And yes, this is the season of Scorpio tropically. But let's look at the stars that we would be what we would be referencing um, during the time frame where the sun would be going through Scorpio. Hang on a second. I just want to look one more thing up on Antinius because Antinius is Ganymedes, yes, but so um in in astrology, Aquarius is known to be the cupbearer. So I would I do look at Aquarius and Aquila constellations um, as being associated with what I just described, this sort of the idea of the um, uh, taking on of a younger, associate and the um, everything that's associated with it. I don't that's not really something I want to get into, and I don't know if I'm going to be flagged, and but I think everyone knows what I'm talking about. So it was one thing that I did research as I came across the references in ancient astrology and understanding now, looking at Aquarius as Ganymedes and Aquila, and then looking at the stars in those constellations as being associated with this, the love of the youth, the boy, and um, the issues that we have with that now. So, of course, because I wanted to see um, where this would be referenced in an individual's chart, as well as maybe what would be coming up within the collective to be made conscious about these practices, and what the ancient roots and the esoteric, the hidden meaning behind all of this, and where we would find that within the zodiac, because that was fascinating to me. And I'm just skimming the website to see if there's anything else that I wanted to mention. Hmm. Man. There's so much in mythology that is so hidden and so encoded. Uh, so much very interesting. So I'm still reading about Aquila here. I'm still looking at all of the references to Zeus and Ganymedes and the things that we can, the deep associations. And I'm laughing because I'll just read this part here. Um, Aetes, in parentheses Greek aetos, which means an eagle, also called Aqualius or eagle stone, is a stone said to have magical properties, particularly connected with childbirth. The previous paragraphs were talking about childbirth and a particular herb, which is thought to be associated with, thought to be referencing arnica, and all of this based on etymology, um, and to easing the pain of childbirth, and finding this mythical plant only found, quote, in the upper reaches of heaven where Anu lived. So, Anu, what do we know as Anu, right? Anu Naki, you know. Okay. So, anyway, what else? Yeah, so the eagle stone, having magical properties, particularly associated with childbirth, supposed at one time to form part of an eagle's nest. Pliny mentions them. It is said without these stones, eagles cannot hatch their eggs. The stones are a hollow oval nodule of yellow clay ironstone, the nucleus of which, being of a different texture, had by drying become detached from the surrounding crust so as to rattle Loosely, there was an ancient belief that the eagle found it necessary to have one in her nest before she could lay her eggs. And then it goes on to talk about Russian nesting dolls, and philosophers and theologians have conjectured that every individual existed as a homunculus in Adam's testicles, spermism, or Eve's ovaries, ovism, the hypothesis that the embryo could contain even smaller embryos ad infinitum. I've thought about that. Like the eggs within my eggs, within their eggs, and so on and so on. Very crazy. Quantum. So the hypothesis that each, yeah, embryo could contain even smaller embryos ad infinitum, like a Matryoshka doll, spermists claimed the homunculus must come from the man and the ovis who located the homunculus in the ova. Very, very interesting. So the eagle is Jove. Jove is Jupiter, Zeus, same thing. The eagle is Jove's guardian, called his arms bearer or armiger, because so full of heat that the coldest giant stone rattles when warmed under a breeding eagle, as if an egg, according to Lucan. There was something else I wanted to pull out of this website before I go on to Scorpio. What was it? So, just a little bit about the etymology. The mythical plant possibly associated with arnica. The prefix arn resembles Old English. Ern, eagle, as in the name Arnold, and also linked to the word prayer. Eagles, the chief bird of prey, Prey, were believed to be carriers of prayers to the sky. Medieval mystics often invoked the eagle to evoke the vision of God and compared prayer with the eagle's soaring flight into the sunlight. The story of Ajax is said to be based on the appearance of an eagle sent by Zeus in response to Heracles' prayer to Zeus to send a brave son to his friend Telamon. Telamon. Prayer is from the Indo-European root prek, P-R-E-K, to ask, entreat, derivatives pray, prayer, precarious, deprecate, imprecate, pridue, from these words from prex, prayer, postulate, expostulate, these words from Latin postulare, to ask, request, postulant, a candidate for admission into a religious order. Postulant. Okay, so you get what I'm saying. I think I kind of diverted a little bit there, but that is the constellation Aquila. And Aquarius does also have degrees that are um, associated with the themes that I just mentioned, right? Now, the the degrees of the constellation Aquila are located in zodiacal, tropical, Capricorn, and Aquarius. Late Capricorn into early Aquarius. So we're talking between 16 to 17 degrees of Capricorn, 18, 19, 20, 24 degrees of Capricorn um, are the major stars then in Aquila. Then we have some minor stars in Aquila at 26, and then 0 degrees of Aquarius, 0 to 1, 2, 3, and 5 degrees of Aquarius. So that influence everything that I just described, the dynamic of the emperor sending out his emissary, his scout, to bring back a youth, a beautiful youth of talent, um, being associated with these degrees in the zodiac. So I'll let you fill in the blanks and extrapolate. But currently, Pluto is at the last few degrees, in the last few degrees of Capricorn. Now, many of you will have heard reference to the fact that the USA is in its Pluto return. So this is Pluto where it was at the degree of the zodiac when the United States of America was formed, 1776, etc. So that influence, we are returning right back to that degree. And with the Pluto return, the destruction, the crumbling of the old system and moving into a new system. So Pluto, in fact, we talk about the, you know, death and rebirth process, the scorpionic recycling of life, and in this case, the life of our country as we've known it. But what the foundations and the power, where the foundations of the power rests, is what we are coming back to and having brought up to be seen consciously and understood what the what the true power is and what what the elites in the power structure have engaged in. And so if we're looking at where Pluto is in the zodiac, right? It's having passed through the degrees of the constellation of Aquila. So Pluto also being associated with Scorpio. Scorpio um, representing taboo, and very um, dark subjects that get swept under the rug, not talked about. It's taboo. It's you know you don't want to go there. Like these things are like not taboo, is not acceptable um, by, general society. It's thought as being perversities and dysfunction, right? And so Scorpio and Pluto being of the same resonance, it is talking about sexuality and the dysfunctions and perversions. Not that sex itself is perverted or dysfunctional. It is the dysfunction and inversion of the natural expression of Scorpio Pluto energy, right? So the taboo is things that are considered to be not okay, right? And so so we're talking about Pluto in Capricorn, and Capricorn being government and power structures and sort of this the idea of legacy and y- uh, people in power, but like uh ruling elite in terms of things that are handed down, position and power and um opportunities open to only such persons because of their familial and DNA heritage, um, genealogy. So Scorpio and Pluto deal with genealogy. Capricorn deals with the father, the patriarchal lineage, right? So here we are talking about um, the family sort of bloodlines and structure of power. And those are the roots and the foundation of our country and our government. And as the US goes through its Pluto return, these are things that more and more of the public is starting to understand that there is sort of a hierarchical ruling elite power structure, um, and one does not get there based on merits, but based on one's family lineage and particular beliefs and practices. So we are talking about the degrees of Capricorn. And if I move Pluto back, Pluto is at 28 degrees of Capricorn right now. So let's go back about, let's say, I don't know, 5 years, not quite 10 years, but 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Yeah, let's take it back 7 years. Seven being a cycle of Saturn, since Saturn takes 28 years, so Saturn, 7 years is 1/3 of a Saturn cycle. So if I go back 7 years ago, I have Pluto at 16 degrees of Capricorn. That's 2016. And let's see what else we had at the time. We had not yet had Jupiter in Scorpio, which brought up a lot about the CT child merchandising. Um, Saturn actually, Saturn's transit through Scorpio back in 2012, 2011, really 2012, Saturn going through Scorpio was where I started to see more of this information being talked about. So few people knew about it. More people started talking about it. There was more information. 2012, 13, 14. That's when we really saw a lot about that. So 2013, Saturn, 2012, Saturn in Scorpio. We had the North Node transiting through Scorpio. So 2012 into 2013, a lot of that stuff started getting exposed. We started looking more at the abuse of children within families. These are taboo subjects. Scorpio needs to talk about it, it needs to excavate all of that from the psyche so we can understand these things. Um, and a lot of people probably got triggered and perhaps had memories come back during that time or were dealing with child abuse, sex abuse within their families during the time of 2012 into 2013 because Saturn, the planet of um, the ruler of Capricorn, so ruler of the patriarchal lineage, the father, the the idea of karma, the sins of the father, right? And the North Node, both going through Scorpio. That's when a lot of this information, more of more of it started being talked about and talking about people in power, people in government, government involvement, government for facilitation. Um, During that time, we were discussing more of that, and that is, again, taboo. So between now, that time, 2012 and 2013, we are experiencing the resurfacing. So it comes off in layers. So gradually, the layers get exposed, but there was major exposure during that time because of the transits of the North Node and Saturn in those degrees. And a lot of people during that time were dealing with the realization that these things had gone on in their own families and exposing it and talking about it and you know um, seeing more people prosecuted for it. Perhaps, I don't know, there was some adjustment of the statute of limitations for certain things at one time, adjusted. So, um, where was Pluto at? Yeah, okay, so Pluto was in Capricorn from, let's see, well, Pluto was in Capricorn at that time, the zodiacal sign of Capricorn. And the degrees of Aquila would have been reached by 2015, 2016, 2016, Pluto was at 16 degrees. So remember I was talking about the degrees of Aquila starting at 16. So from there on, we were having more of this dredged up because that's what Pluto does. It excavates, it wants to release the toxins. It needs to bring up these taboo subjects. But now, in terms of government and ruling structures, we have these things being readdressed. I think I just blinked out there, perhaps, but I'm back. Okay, so starting around that time, more information was coming forward. Now, fast forward a few years as Pluto moves forward in the zodiac over 2016, 17, 18, because of retrogrades hitting those degrees over and over again, coming off in layers, removing the thinning the veil and removing these scales from people's eyes so that we could see it, expose more and more. And then we had Saturn moving into Capricorn. Okay, that only increased it. So Saturn being the judge and the lord of karma, 2019 at 16 degrees of Capricorn, that would have started its transit through Aquila, starting to address these things, um, and holding people accountable, though we haven't seen it come to its fullness as of yet. Um, we're getting to the bottom of it. It's more widely known and accepted as, we understand that these things do go on and our government is involved. So every year around this time in Scorpio season, we see after the harvest season, we do see the season of sacrifice. So in the ancient cultures, the harvest season and and sacrifice go together. So in order to have um, a good crop yield and a good harvest, we look at the planting season in the spring, Aries, the ram, the sacrificial lamb, the concept of sacrifice, and the Holocaust. And then in Libra season, after the fall equinox, this is the harvest. We also see sacrifice. And it can be noted that there is usually someone who is perhaps offered up as the chum for the sharks. This is just my observation and my opinion that the closer we get to the truth and the exposure of the taboo of what really goes on up at the top, it seems that because we have Scorpio season where the natural inclination is to look at the dark side, look at the taboo, do research, get down to the bottom of things and look at the dark side, the dark topics. Um, I feel like we're being given, the sacrificial lamb, the Holocaust, as, you know, a diversion. It's kind of like, the crowds demand that we sacrifice a prisoner. Is it Jesus or Barabbas? Let Barabbas go and we'll sacrifice Jesus, that kind of thing. So, as I said, I've been watching these things for years, and the convergence of Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn in 2019 into 2020. We all know what transpired during that time period. Seems to me like a major diversion and attempt to retain control of the masses and the keep the spell intact by control and power, right? So Saturn is limitations, restrictions, control, lockdowns. Pluto, again, control, fear, control by manipulation and scare tactics. Um, and what did we live through? 2020, 2021. And interesting that it would be Pluto, as it goes through these degrees and conjuncting stars in Aquila and being um, being that Pluto is in direct motion after having been retrograde, moving back towards the United States. The Pluto placement. So I think this will only intensify. And as we get into mm, early next year, I'm going to say January. Let's see when Pluto actually goes back into Aquarius. That would be January. It could be late December. Let me just check. I want to be exact about this. And I did notice when Pluto went into Aquarius, because it did go into Aquarius, it dipped into Aquarius and then it retrograded. But the short time it was in Aquarius was like total Weirdsville. Um, anyway, January 21st or 20th, when Pluto goes into Aquarius. So on January 20th, the sun goes into Aquarius, and then Pluto goes into Aquarius. Mark that day on your calendar. This will be an interesting time. So in another video, I will have to go deeper into looking back at the time frame when Pluto did enter Aquarius for a short time. I remember I liked it, but uh I do, I think that we'll definitely see more of a push towards control digitally and the internet and obviously digital currency. All right. So, yes, January 20th. January 20th, Pluto and the Sun conjunct. And this is, I think, um, the degree where Jupiter and Saturn, I think, also conjuncted here during 2021 or 20. If you bear with me, I will go back. It was very significant. Um, yeah, I think it was Jupiter and Saturn conjuncting. Hang on, I'm rewinding. Mm, very, very early degrees of Aquarius. 2020. Oh, okay. Yeah. So y'all know what was going on. It was Saturn restrictions and Jupiter freedom and Aquarius the internet. So we could, with Pluto re-entering Aquarius, that would be, more control, and a continuation of what sort of a control structure was laid into place. I would think that that would be technological, software, backdoors, information harvesting, and implementation of greater control. Phase two, but also, because we started out talking about Aquarius and Aquila, the underlying reason, in my opinion, would be that they need to control the flow of information because what is coming out and the information that people are sharing is absolutely smoking gun damning information. Though I think that those things will be coming out in lawsuits. Because in a lawsuit, you have to present all of your evidence. You have your day in court to defend yourself, and you can bring whatever witnesses and whatever digital forensics you have access to, and that becomes part of the court record. Now, Saturn and Jupiter conjuncting at, was it 1 to 2 degrees of Aquarius? Jupiter being law and legal, and Saturn being the government, the people who are in power and who are tasked with governing, who are responsible, um, and Saturn is, being held accountable, but through the court system. So these could be lawsuits that we don't know about yet that got started or had their start or had the incident that led to a lawsuit being filed. Maybe even class action lawsuits due to infringement and restriction of freedom, Saturn, Jupiter, during this time. There's many ways that it can play out. However, that's just a side note. But back to the issues that we uh, that I discussed of the influence of these stars and their association with this whole ancient practice of pederasty, man boy love, and how it has continued today to up to today. And some of the other aspects that I won't go into um, also make me feel confident that we're going to be really talking more about this in the future. Is that there are um, uh, let's say cults, but you wouldn't necessarily think of them as being religious, but they are cults in terms of their um, ideologies and practices and how they control their members. That's what makes it a cult. And their practices often include things that, general society considers to be verboten, taboo. And there is, well, the aspects that I've been looking at, certain things that I've been looking at within the astrology point to the the increase actually of groups that would be have considered to be having taboo belief systems, and the rise of fanaticism of certain ideologies. I mean, across the board, you can find them in every corner of the globe, in every civilization. They don't even, it doesn't even have to do with um, the borders of countries, or, it expands across all of humanity, this propensity towards um, certain belief systems and ideologies and fanaticisms. And I've been looking at this with the rise of the sort of doomsday cults. I mean, that comes out of a Christian sect, but I think more of what I've been seeing in, in terms of, like, let's say, true crime cases where you see this really concentrated in the LDS church. So the Mormons, but not all, again, not all Mormons. There are these offshoots and fanatical sects and teachings within the Mormon church, which, I mean, that's a sect or an off, not a, I don't know if you'd call it a sect, but it's an offshoot of Christianity. It's not mainstream Christianity. Certainly not all Christians believe these things, but we are going to be seeing more and more of that come up, and we'll be discussing and understanding things that we were not aware of, because we have, you know, people who have very interesting and unique belief systems. So, a lot more talk about the psychology behind cults and apocalyptic things. And, the idea of apocalypse and sort of doomsday, that's not limited to, let's say, these fringe Mormon groups. This occurs within the um, groups of people who are, watching UFOs and thinking, wondering about alien civilizations, and, thinking that there are groups of extraterrestrials that are our ancestors or gods, right? Um, Coming back to save us. Hi, Lynn. Lynn's here. Hi, Lynn, in the chat. Um, it's okay, Lynn. There is no such thing as late when we have archived video. I'm almost done, so you can go back and listen to it later. But I'm good today. I'm good. Thank you for asking. How are you, Lynn? How are you doing in your corner of the world? I hope everything is peachy. It's raining here today. And when it rains, I want to make soup and I want to make, today I'm going to make pumpkin bread. Yum, yum, yum. Oh my God, I had to stay active this winter because cold weather just makes me want to fucking eat. Cook and eat and eat and cook. Yeah, so anyway. So was I saying we're going to talk a lot more about cults and the mechanisms and a lot of that. I know that that's coming up in the future. So, yes. And so that would include certain cults that have practices centered around children, things that are just abhorrent and reprehensible. And, you know, things that went on centuries ago that we as a human species should have evolved beyond, but the roots of that go very deep, and those are traditions that are passed down within the families. And some people break free of that, and then others become the offenders, the abusers. The abused becomes the abusers, and but not always, uh, some come out and speak out about it and are here to break that family karma and curse. You know, I remember thinking years and years ago, long time ago, the thought came to me that as a woman observing men, um, I saw a lot of very deep dysfunction in men generally. Obviously, it doesn't relate to all men, but it does because I think if you look at if you look at abuse and certain things, I mean, it happened somewhere along the line in the family bloodline. Um, I remember thinking very deeply about this, because I saw men as suffering. I saw the very deep wound. And you can look at if you like mythology and stories like this, look at the Grail King and the Amfortas wound and the Fisher King. This story talks about a wound of the prince who is not yet a king. The prince in the thigh in some versions of the story, because in different cultures we have the same story. So it's talking about figuratively the wound of the masculine, of the male, and it relates to the generative organs. So we're talking about a sexual wounding. And I didn't even know about, I didn't understand the Fisher King and the Grail myth and all of that, or like the Grail King and this wound, so to speak, that all men carry, um, until, later on I studied more and understood, but intuitively this came to me that something's wrong here. There was a quote offense um done towards the males that over centuries or thousands of years that the men carry with them that keeps them from reaching their potential, opening their hearts, connecting with women. Um, and so in meditating upon that, I saw that this wound was sexual, and then realized, that whether or not someone has been sexually abused in this lifetime, it happened somewhere along the line, right? Because our our gene pool, we are the sum total of you know, our gene pool. So we have some form of genetic memory, and so somewhere along the line it happens. And then I also later on came to understand that circumcision is a part of that, because that's a trauma. I mean, that is a trauma and a pain that cuts deep into the psyche, because the baby doesn't even remember it, right? But it is the earliest form of like mind control and sort of a splitting or compartmentalization, which is what happens with trauma. Um, anyway, so years ago, many long time ago, thinking like realizing, what's wrong? Because always, I come at things from a place of healing and trying to understand and seeing the wound, the wound of men, and of course women have their own wounding, and the handless maiden is the sort of counterpart to um the allegorical representation of the feminine wound, um the feminine version of, this mythology. um but focusing on the sort of the Grail king and the wound, the masculine wound, right? So the wounding, and just impressing upon me that it's something that is passed down and carried, and so, of course, hidden very, very deeply within the psyche, that they're not even aware of it. And if you think about what um, sexual abuse does to a person, um, especially between males, it emasculates and um, um, diverts and distorts the natural masculine drive. I mean, I, I have male friends. I talk to many, many guys, and I I know there's a lot of abuse that goes on, and men don't talk about it, and that is something that is very traumatizing and detrimental to the psyche. Um, this came up recently, that was circulating around on social media about Johnny Lane from Warrant, and the ex-girlfriend or wife or whatever had written a autobiography, and she talks about him being raped, and um, and how that contributed to his addictions, and ultimately, that destroyed him, but carrying that wound. So, um, it was something that I realized before, this was even before I started studying astrology. I think I was attending um, like I think it was a Pentecostal, or, I mean, I don't know what you would label it, but a Christian church. Very much into prophecy and healing and stuff like that. So, I went through that phase, but um, so my my deep ponderance came before the astrology and esoteric study came. And so um just looking at these things as sort of a, very, very deep ancient practice, very hidden and taboo, and it still goes on. And we know a lot more. It's talked about much more openly within pop culture. If you go and look at like the rap, like gossip in like the rap and hip hop industry, um and the things that have gone on and people have spoken about. And um it's the hierarchy and dominance, asserting dominance over one man over another. But like when it happens with children, it's just even more hideous. But I mean, it is pervasive, and it is ancient, and it is spans across the human race altogether. So if you're wondering how there is a control structure that is able to um, cast its spell and maintain control over humanity for so long, it becomes obvious that that is part of the practice and the magical rites that hold the quote reality in place. And um, just very interesting to me to see the stars, because I did look at a few people's charts, very well known figures who have been that many people believe that they're involved in such things. And I have found the connections to certain stars. And ancient astrology is different than some of the astrology today. Some today it's like, you know, it's all good and uh love and light. And I mean, I can look at the stars that way, and I mean, the planets, and interpret charts that way. But the ancients knew that there were certain stars and certain configurations that were evil, you know? Um, and if somebody comes in with those particular markings, um, not that they don't have free will, but they're going to be put in a position um, where they are influenced by evil and given the choice to participate or not participate. Now, when we're talking about bloodline things, obviously some things happen, even before they're born, and even to um, ritualize the conception, or and then the abuse starts in um, very early on after birth, that the people don't even remember. So in that respect, that's fate. They don't have a free will choice, but they do later on, I guess, when they realize what it is. At some point, I guess they have the choice to join or not. So, fate and free will. Anyway, that's my video. That's just my response and what I wanted to discuss with Aquila. I might talk more about Aquarius and maybe some more, well, definitely more about Scorpio. So if you like what I've been laying down here, if you dig my vibe, um, subscribe to my channel. Thank you, and I appreciate you. Please and thank you. Like the video and hit the bell as you subscribe on the way out the door so that you can get notified. And if you want to connect with me in other places of the internet, I have a Rumble channel, Astro Lunatic, and I have my Twitter account. You can follow me over on Twitter, Instagram, or on Facebook. I have a Facebook page. I have a Gilded Chat, and that invitation is linked in the description box here below, as well as a Substack newsletter. Go on to Substack, search for Astro Lunatic, and you should be able to find me. So with that, I bid you adieu, and until next time, when we will be discussing more about Scorpio and my favorite taboo subjects. So don't be afraid of the dark. It's Scorpio season. Embrace it. Let the light shine in the darkness. Okay, guys. Ciao for now. Bye, Lynn. Have a great day. You too. Bye bye.